All right, this morning for Sunday school, we are supposed to be moving on in the canons of Dort. However, we are about to approach an article, what is it? Let me look. Article 15 will be controversial enough, 16 will be controversial enough. But when we get to Article 17, oh man, the wheels are going to come off. So we've already spent a considerable amount of time because of the article dealing with assurance. That turned into 7 messages dealing with the whole idea on how to know assurance. And we looked at the evidential idea. We kind of disproved the evidential idea, which then leads to we still got to find out what to replace that with. We don't have a lot of options. But Article 17 deals with the salvation of infants of believers, which leads to all kinds of questions and arguments. And you could even argue that Article 17 may prove that the Synod of Dort, the Canons of Dort, did not follow sola scriptura. Because there's no way you can prove the point that they tried to make in Scripture alone. I mean, Scripture alone basically doesn't give us any information about infants and their salvation. And the only story everyone tries to use doesn't really prove what they claim it proves. So that's going to be a controversial one. What we're going to be trying to do with the Canons of Dort, one of the reasons we are studying the Canons of Dort is we're trying to attach it to the different things that's going to be showing up in the book of Romans. So we'll be referencing it back and forth, but we're going to set this aside for just a little bit and go ahead and introduce one of the things we're getting ready to be working on for a long period of time. So let's do this. If you have a Bible, open up to the Gospel of Luke. Gospel of Luke. For those who were not here Wednesday or did not hear the message from Wednesday, then you probably have no clue what's going on. For those who are here, you do, but we'll introduce everything this way, all right? Gospel of Luke, chapter 5. Now, in the Gospel of Luke, if you start in chapter 5, verse 1, sometimes chapter 5, verse 1 to verse 11 is sometimes called the call of the first disciples, right? And so if you go back to verse 10, of Luke chapter 5, verse 10, or go to verse 10. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And then verse 11, And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. All right? Think of it this way. Following Christ involves forsaking things. To follow Christ means you must be willing to forsake things. That seems to be a clear New Testament teaching. If I'm going to follow Christ, then I have to be willing to forsake. Now, they forsook their livelihood in this particular case. But as Christians, if we're going to be followers of Christ, we have to be willing to forsake things. And the thing I want you to consider about forsaking is you must always be willing to forsake any belief that you have that as you continue to follow Christ, because I've stated so many times, the belief you had yesterday cannot be the belief that you should have 10 years from now, because you should constantly be growing, studying, and challenging yourself. Because some Christians have this idea, I became a Christian, I learned 6 things, and those 6 things will always remain the same. That almost seems to argue that you learned something and you learned it infallibly and that you're perfect in your understanding. That's not the way it works. We must always be willing to forsake. Listen, we should be willing to forsake anything that comes into conflict with truth. Everyone agree with that? Right? And to do that, is that always easy to do? No. Was it easy for them to forsake everything and follow him? No. Following Christ is not an easy proposition. It constantly requires, okay, I hold on to this, this is what I believe. Oh, no, I may have to put that down. And we don't like it, and it's uncomfortable, and we get bothered by it. But if you get bothered by it, you're in the wrong religion. Okay? Following Christ involves forsaking. You got to put things aside. Let's go to another passage. Same kind of concept shows up. Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, verse 25. And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said unto them, If any man come to me, and hate not his father, and mother, and wife, and children, and brethren, and sisters, yea, and his own life, also he cannot be my disciple. Now I know there's lots of controversy, especially in the Protestant world, because no one can agree on how to interpret that. Right? Some believe discipleship in Christianity is the same thing, right? Others are like, well, if that's the same thing, well, then 99.9% of Christians are not saved. Okay? Because they clearly don't hate their own life, and they clearly place relationship before Christ all the time. So then other Christians are like, okay, well, that can't be the same thing, so discipleship is a more committed Christian. Okay, whatever this discipleship is, because we could get into a debate about that all day, and everyone's just going to determine what they think it means, and that's not going to matter what I say. We have to at least acknowledge this. Jesus is making a demand that if we're going to follow him, he has to be placed first. That means the things that we love and cherish has to come second. He uses mother, father, brother, sisters. He uses that as the illustration. And why would he use that? Because everyone can relate to that. Correct? But it can be even beliefs you hold dear to you have to be placed aside if they come in conflict with truth. In fact, what does he say in verse 27? Just drive the point home. Whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. To follow Christ involves a forsaking, and to follow Christ involves a crucifixion. To follow Christ involves a forsaking, and to follow Christ involves a crucifixion. Now, whose crucifixion is he referring to there? Your crucifixion. You have to die to self. Well, if you're willing to die to self, and here's what happens. As soon as you hear teaching that you don't like, guess what hops off the cross really quick and rises up? Self. Right? Self needs to be crucified. So this is very important, and the reason I am emphasizing this before I introduce what we're going to be doing is this reason. We've talked a lot about stages that Christians should go through, and I'm going to give you these stages again, and I'm going to be driving these points home over and over and over. There is learning theology, right? Every Christian should learn theology. Why? Theology is the study of God, right? Theology is the study of the doctrines about God from His Word. Every Christian should be a theologian. I have said that almost from the first sermon I ever preached in this building, all right? Now, I have done everything in my power to give you that ability to learn theology. I have taught it. I have provided you books. I have told you which systematic theologies to read. I have done everything in my power. I have posted 9 bazillion things to try to help you with that. If you did not learn it, whose fault? On yours, not me, not my fault. Okay, I've done everything. And even if you weren't here, theology books have been around, I don't know, since the beginning of Christianity. So that means you didn't care to go get them. So that's not on me. After you learn theology, what's the next step? Use theology. And what do I mean by use theology? Well, once you learn theology, you have to start using it in this way. I got to apply it to my life. I got to apply it to the way I think. I got to apply it to my worldview. And the theology you learn, right, is the theology you have to use. That's the only theology you know at that moment. So you declare that theology to be true. You preach that theology. You promote that theology. You challenge other people with that theology because that's the only theology you know. But listen, the way it's supposed to, for some weird reason, Christians have a really broken concept here. You learn it, you use it, but guess what you continue to do? Relearn it. Why? Because the theology you once learned, you have to continue to relearn it to continue to what? Challenge the theology that you previously learned, right? It's a continuing circle, right? There is the learning it, there is the using it. But at some point, this is the way it should work. I learn theology, I use theology, I put it into practice. I'm like, okay, if this is what the theology teaches, how do I view this subject? Right? I've said it so many times about, say, war or shooting someone breaking into your house. How do I learn the theology of love your enemy, turn the other cheek, resist not evil, with then having a view that I can put 2 bullets in someone? You've got to learn your theology and you've got to figure out how to use it. Most people don't get to the using part. They they think they've got a few theological concepts. In many cases, the things that they believe contradict the theology that they learned. So you learn it, you use it, and then what's the third stage? Doing theology. Right? Doing theology means this is where you start questioning theological conclusions. You start coming up with hypotheses. You're coming up with theological theories. You're doing it. Now, 99.9% of Christians don't even know what doing theology looks like. They've never even been in a church that does theology. And I will argue most churches don't allow the doing of theology. They will condemn the doing of theology. You're supposed to just learn 4 or 5 theological principles, and that's it. Just accept that and live with it. That is garbage. Right? I reject this idea completely. So, to do theology means you have to... Now, what's some of the difficulties with doing theology? You've all been in a church that's been doing theology for pretty much forever, so you should all be very able to answer these questions. Do what? It can be very controversial, especially controversial with the people who won't even do the work to learn it, okay? Because people who don't learn it are usually the ones who want to argue against doing it. Okay. All right? Presuppositions, okay? I think the biggest problem with doing theology is it is hard for people to allow themselves to be challenged with truth, right? The truth that they think they know is the only truth they want to know. The truth people think they know is the only truth they want to know. You'll say all day, no, I want truth, I want truth. And then when you come and go, here you go, then you're like, oh, get that away from me. Okay, wait, you're contradicting this. Wait, didn't we used to teach this? Do you want to continue to pursue truth, or do you just want to go, give me 4 little things, and then let's just repeat those 4 little things in different ways? We're trying to get to the doing, all right? Now, one of the things that requires and doing is you have to be confronted with what? Different concepts. You have to challenge what you should have already learned. Like, make sure you get this. You can't do theology if all you do is repeat what you've already learned. So you have to be confronted with something new and different. All right, so we're trying to get to the doing part. Now, we've been doing it in a lot of different ways. Obviously, in eschatology, we did a lot of doing theology in eschatology. That was controversial. Not a lot of people liked it. Well, I don't know what to say in regards to that. We did theology when we got confronted with the idea of, according to a lot of the Protestant world, we're not saved by our works, but our works prove that we're saved, and the evidential idea. So we took the evidential idea to its logical conclusion, and we came up with, wait a minute. How does that work? Right? Because I'm really saying my works save me. Well, I'm not saying my works save me. Yeah, but if I don't have works, you're telling me I'm not saved. So therefore, works is a part of my salvation. So we started questioning. And then when you start looking at the test they give, what did we discover? Well, if we put that test and put it into practice the way they state it, very few people would even pass it. And really, when you give the test, you're really giving a works-based test. I'm not saying, hey, what do you believe? I'm saying, what do you do? Your doing doesn't say, it doesn't prove you're saved, so you're not saved. Well, what about my faith in Christ? That's irrelevant. You've got to have the works. And so we question that. Now, we didn't answer all the questions. We still got a long ways to go. We're in Romans chapter 2, and we're getting ready to get into a major section about judgment according to works. I mean, he lays it out. Your faith is not going to save you. Your deeds are going to save you. Well, wait, what? And then later on, he's going to seem to say completely opposite. Well, how do you merge the two? Okay. Now, I can just give you a simple answer. Hey, don't worry about it. You're saved by faith alone, but the faith that saves doesn't remain alone. And then everyone says, amen, that solved it. That answered it for me. I'm good to go. Yeah, that's because you don't want truth. You want an answer. Does everybody understand there's a difference between wanting truth and wanting an answer? An answer just makes you like, okay, I'm good to go. Truth means, no. I got to keep questioning and keep questioning. So, and as a result of this kind of transition that we're in, and as a result of a lot of things that I have tried to get everyone involved that kind of failed, I kind of decided, you know what? I'm going to kind of do what I want to do, right? And I like to do theology instead of simply, well, I mean, I've been learning theology forever, okay? So I'm going to force everyone into it. So we're about to transition into a very intensive study, and we talked about it on Wednesday, of the Catholic Catechism, which is going to force us to do what? Do theology. It's going to demand it. It's going to absolutely, and you're not going to like it. But you had your chance. You had your chance. I gave you every opportunity to have it. I mean, I gave everyone Bible study guides that would have made it simple for 2019. Okay, but that didn't quite go over. So we're gonna be confronted with some major things, and I hope it goes well. Now, some people may ask, well, why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this, number one, if you need reasons. We're doing it, number one, because I want to, and the things I tried to do that I thought you wanted to, you didn't do. So now we're going to do what I want to, because then I'll stay. Instead of me doing what I thought you wanted, and you're not doing, and then I lose my desire to do it, I'll do what I want to do, and even if you don't do it, I still want to do it, right? So then, therefore, I'm happy, right? And then I don't care what you're doing, right? So that works out good. Number two, doing theology, this is a great way to do it. And number three, third reason, there are 1.2 billion Catholics on the planet. 1.2 billion. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, right? You can't just ignore the Catholicism. Now, the way most Protestants ignore it, the way we handle Catholicism, it goes something like this. They're the harlot spoken of in the book of Revelation, right? They're Babylon. The Pope will be Antichrist, or is Antichrist, and we don't need anything to do with them because they're all lost, right? That's pretty much the Protestant answer, right? They're evil. Just stay away from them, okay? But there's 1.2 billion, and they claim to be Christians, all right? Why? Now, most Christians who reject it could not pass a elementary level test on Catholicism. In fact, I've heard, I cannot tell you how many. I mean, one of the reasons I became such a student of Catholicism is listening to Protestant pastors preach on Catholicism, and even my elementary knowledge was, you don't have a clue what you're talking about. And if pastors condemn Catholicism based off ignorance, then before I condemn Catholicism, what should I condemn? The ignorance of Protestant pastors condemning. In other words, Protestant pastors speaking lies about Catholicism should bother you more than Catholicism. Does that make sense? You should never go along with it. And it always baffles me how scared some Protestants are of Catholicism. They're like, just, they almost treat the Catholic Catechism like it's the Satanic Bible. They're like, I can't touch that and burn my hands. I'm like, come on now. Right? 1.2 billion. That's another reason we're studying. Another reason we're studying it is the lies promoted by Protestants on Catholicism. I mean, I've heard you guys say things about Catholicism that clearly demonstrate you don't know what you're talking about. But yet you're rejecting something you don't understand. How can you reject that which you don't understand? Everyone should say, I can't. All right, so everyone say, I can't. All right. Next, church history. Here's the common, this is the logical way to think. The study of Catholicism leads you to the big fat green book. Okay? The study of church history leads you to the big fat green book. Why? Because every time you study church history, guess what you find every time you lift up a rock? Catholicism, 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 Catholicism. And I'm like, no, that's not the same Catholic Church. It's still Catholicism. Right? Okay. You can't, like, nope. Because this is some Protestants. There were no Catholics, okay? There were no Catholics for, 1,400 years. Then this really evil organization called the Catholic Church arose, and then Luther saved us. Now, Luther's a heretic. I mean, most Protestants still condemn Luther as a heretic, okay? But he saved us. The heretic saved us because we condemn Luther. I mean, we don't agree with Luther on anything, right? So, but he saved us. Wait, how about Zwingli? No, we condemn him. I mean, our tradition of Protestantism condemns everyone for basically 1,900 years. Okay, everyone was wrong. Okay, as Baptists, we believe everyone was wrong. Catholics were wrong. The Greek Orthodox were wrong. Luther was wrong. Zwingli was wrong. Calvin was wrong. Everyone was wrong. We got it right. Okay, well, if you're going to study church history, you're going to be confronted with Catholicism. It's not my fault, right? That's just history. We've studied history. So if we've studied history, shouldn't we take the next logical stop? And guess what? When we study this, guess what we're going to have to be confronted with over and over and over? Everyone say it? Church history. Right? Church history leads you to it. When you study it, you're led back to church history. Does that make sense? So here's what we're going to do. Now, I don't know how I want everyone to have a piece of paper in their notebook. And I want you to divide it into 3 sections. All right? We're going to keep a running tally. All right? 3 sections. Section 1, church history. Okay? Church history, or you can just put CH for an abbreviation. All right? Church history. Number 2, Catholicism. Number 3, us. We're going to keep a running tally. Now, what do you think is going to go in this tally? What do we learn the church believed in history? Right? Right? What did the church teach in history? What does the Catholic Church teach? And what do we teach? Okay. Before us. Okay? All right. We'll call it church history, all right? When we say church history, obviously not the 1900s, not the 1800s. We'll go before the 1500s. Okay, we'll go before the 1500s, okay? All right? Does that make sense? All right? Because, I mean, in any of the beliefs that arrive after 1500, I'm going to make a pretty good argument, are going to be in conflict with the history prior to 1500s, okay? I think that's going to be pretty easy to prove, okay? I stand confident on that. If I'm wrong, we'll prove me wrong, okay? So now here's the reason why. We're going to look in church history and go, oh, this is what they believed. Okay, here's what Catholics believe. Here's what we believe. And we're going to see where there's what? We're going to see where there's agreement and where there's... Let me give you an example. Early church, no question. I don't think this is even debatable. There's a structure of church organization. Right? Oh, we'll do this. We'll start with Acts 15. Right? We'll even go with the Bible. What happened in Acts 15? A council. And wasn't it understood when we studied Acts 15 that the decision of the council would have been binding on the churches? Right? Do we have that? Okay. We don't. We don't have that. Everybody understand that, right? No council can meet and is binding on us because we're independent, right? And Southern Baptist doesn't really work even in the Southern Baptist because Southern Baptist churches are what? Autonomous, okay? So it works in some Protestant denominations, but so they had councils. Now, these councils were authoritative on the churches. This is what, hey, we got a problem here. How do we fix it? The decision of the council was authoritative over the church. Did we not see this at the Council of Nicaea, Council of Constantinople, all the... Okay, so right there we see something at a practice and something in history that we don't have. Catholics have it. We don't have it. That's an example. Another example, church structure. There were threefold: bishop, presbyter, deacons. The early church fathers said, treat the bishop as if he is God. He's in the place of Christ. Listen to the bishop. Right? I can give you all kinds of church father quotes. We could go through them all day. Right? Do we have that? Okay. Everyone should say, clearly not. I don't even have any authority. Okay? Right? Do Catholics have that? Yes. Okay. You see, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to see what they said versus us. Now, if we disagree, then we have to come to a reason on why we disagree, and then we have to not just come to a reason, we have to justify that reason. Now, that's going to be doing theology. That's not going to be comfortable, is it? That's not going to be comfortable. So we're going to keep a tally. Now, sometimes I'll forget. So if I forget, you can raise your hand and go, well, wait a minute, should this go on our little tally sheet? You can keep your own tally sheet, okay? Because we're going to be doing a lot of history, we're going to be doing a lot of theology, and we're going to be doing a lot of different things like that. That's just a good example of just a few examples. I could give all kinds of other examples. Cyprian of Carthage, 253 A.D. 253 A.D. Guess what they're debating in 253 A.D. in the epistle that Cyprian wrote? Not if they should baptize babies, when they should baptize babies. They're not even debating if it should happen. They're debating when it should happen. Should it happen before the 8 day? Should you wait 8 days or should you do it before 8? Cyprian says don't wait. Others are like wait because they connect the baptism with circumcision. All right? That's why. Okay, so that's 253. All right, clearly, is that us? No, that's not us. That's not us. That's 253. I mean, that's and they're not even debating the if. The if had already been resolved. They're to the do. All right, how do you work that? You see, we can make a list like this. Now, in an attempt to help you with this list, I've already pleaded, begged. I don't know what else I can do. I can't come to your house. I ask people to read a lot of things. And I know no one's ever going to read a church history book. No, I know no one was going to read the 33 volumes of the Church Fathers. I know church history is not something people's going to do. But I plead and beg everyone read the book Four Witnesses. Right? It's the easiest church history book you can ever read. Okay? You started it. How far did you get? Okay, got to the Clement of Rome. Okay. 4 witnesses. They take 4 church fathers, right? And what they do with the 4 church fathers is these church fathers serve as filling in a gap, right? Because you have the apostles, correct? And then you get to the Council of Nicaea. The ante-Nicene fathers, sometimes what they refer to, these 4 fill in that gap of what happened between the apostles and Nicaea. And the way he does it is he takes 4 individuals, starts with Clement of Rome, and what he does is he basically creates a story, right? He's using historical documentations and quotes from the fathers, and then he fills it in with a narrative, like a story. It reads like a novel. However, you're reading quote after quote after quote after quote from the fathers, and so you're going to here's what Clement of Rome taught and believed. Ooh, here's how the early church solved these kinds of problems. And when you read this, you'll be able to fill in your own tally. Because you're going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. That's an early church teaching. All right, who else believes that? We don't. Wait, here's the early church teaching. Who else believes that? We don't. And your list is going to be, our side's going to be blank a lot. All right? And that's something we'll have to deal with. Right? So 4 witnesses. I've told everyone about the book. Everyone should. I did an entire recording where I went through the introduction of the book. Everyone should get that book because it will be key in this study. And some of those fathers will be mentioned as we study the Catechism. So keep that in mind. All right. And so why are we doing this? I kind of gave you some basic reasons. 1.2 billion. The lies told by Protestants. History demands the study of Catholicism. History demands it. That's why, have you noticed why most churches don't study church history? Why do you think most Protestant churches don't study church history? Well, no, because you'll end up studying Catholicism. Now, they don't want that. And that's why many independent fundamental Baptists, right? I did a recording where I was reading an article from Way of Life Literature, Independent Fundamental Baptist, and guess what he basically said? All the church fathers are lost. Every single one of them. They're all heretics. Baby baptizing, partaking of the blood and body of Christ, heretics. So don't read, just stay away from all of them. Avoid them all. Don't read them. Okay, well, I admire that as being consistent. Now, you got other Protestants who try to pretend like, we love church history. We love church. Where's that quote from Augustine that agrees with us on election? Okay, wait, where's that council who agrees with us on the Trinity? We like that stuff. Don't give me that church history stuff. Don't give me a quote from Cyprian of Carthage that talks about infant baptism. Shh, we don't want that. Wait, don't talk to me about them saying submit to the bishop. We don't want that. Okay, don't give us those early church fathers quotes about the Eucharist. We definitely don't want that. Right? So that's not a student of church history. The student of church history does what? All of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, what we agree with and what we disagree. Because what should you want more than anything? Okay, I want everybody to say that again. What should you want more than anything? I hope y'all really mean that. Okay? Because if you do, then there should be no reason to get upset. Right? Correct? Okay. All right. And the last reason we're going to be doing this is because the influence of Catholicism. If you're a Christian, if you don't believe Catholicism has influenced you, I'm sorry, you're clueless. When I ask you to give me a definition of the Trinity, you are speaking the Catholic Church. You're not speaking Bible. Does the Bible give you a clear one God coexisting as 3 distinct persons, co-equal, co-eternal, right? 3 persons, 1 essence. Homoousios, homoiousios. You don't know anything about that from the Bible. You get that from hypostatic union. That's not laid out in the Bible. That's laid out from the church councils. The canon you use. Okay, that's you're like these books are the Bible. Do you get a list of the books that belong in the Bible from the Bible? No, you get that list from councils that are Accepted as authoritative by whom? Are they accepted as authoritative by us? No, they're not. We don't believe they're authoritative. We don't believe they're authoritative in any way. We reject all their authority, right? We go back and look at what they say, and if we agree with it, then we say they were right, and if we don't agree with it, we say they were wrong, but we're glad that they were right on the canon. Well, wait, were they right on the canon? Yeah, there was a lot of different canons, right? Okay, which canon should we go with? We find one canon. Well, wait, how about those councils? What canons did they approve? Can you tell me which council approved which canon? Now, you all believe in the canon. Which council gave you the canon that you use? And did any council give you the canon you use? Or are you using a canon that was rejected by the councils? I don't think any of you can even tell me. Well, yeah, they have the Apocrypha. Right, that's why I'm asking. Which are the canon you used, did it come from that? And you're like, well, no, they were wrong. Okay, yeah, so... But that's something you should care about. I mean, you claim to be a Christian. You claim that these books are authoritative. You argue with everyone else. No, these are... And if you get into an argument with a Catholic, you're like, you're wrong. Those books shouldn't be included. According to whom? And this is what you'll do. You're like, okay, I'm not going to go read any of those church councils. I need a Protestant book that tells me why I shouldn't accept them. Give me a Protestant book. Okay. 5 reasons I shouldn't accept the Apocrypha. Woo, I'm good. Glad that answered my question. I don't know how they got there. I don't know why they're there. I don't know what any of the church councils say, but I'm okay. The Catholic is wrong because I say they're wrong. Come on. You accept their influence on everything else, but I don't accept their influence on this. Remember, ignorance of the influence does not negate the reality of the influence. All right? Does that make sense? Okay, so those are some good reasons we're going to do this. I know this is weird. To be a Baptist church in the middle of West Texas, okay, and we're getting ready to study the Catholic Catechism, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I've said so many times, if we're going to be just like every other church, then there's no point in us existing. Right? We can go to the other churches and just do whatever they do, which is very little study. Right? There's a lot of pretending study. Right? Now, in the study of the Catechism, we're going to do all kinds of things. We're going to do all kinds. It'll get broken up. There'll be times we'll be doing a devotional study. There'll be times we'll be doing. It's going to be mixed up. So it's not because it's a gigantic undertaking, right? So we're not going to do this in a fake way. We're going to do this in a real way, right? And so we're going to do it. There's going to be. Sometimes it'll be a Wednesday, and so hopefully you will at least make use of the app and listen to what you miss. Because if you miss. Here's what I mean, and I've got to be dogmatic about this. Do not come and argue with me about anything if you're not listening and doing this stuff. Because arguing me from the point of you don't even know what's going on, that drives me to the point of losing it, right? You better, if you're going to step to me, you better step to me with some. You better be ready to. Let's go. I want to see the notebook. I want to see your study. And you're like, well, I didn't even hear the sermon last week. Why are you arguing with me? Okay. Why? I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, then stop arguing. Right? This is going to require what? Thinking. It's going to require far more thinking than it's going to require arguing. Arguing is usually a sign. Typically, when someone starts arguing, it's proof they've already lost the argument. Because if they really know it, they don't need to argue. They just need to present their evidence. Arguing is usually a sign that they have no evidence to present. Does that make sense? Because if you have all the information, then you're willing to have a discussion, right? Hey, I spent the last 6 months, I've been studying on this hard, and here are the 4 things that I found that I think contradicts where we are. Okay, let me see them. No one who's ever argued with me has ever done that. Okay, never. No, they're just like, you're wrong! I'm right! Okay, well, congratulations. Woohoo! Everyone says that. Does that make sense? All right, so here's what we're going to do. I got 9,000 copies here. All right, we're going to start handing out. These cost about $6 a piece if you would like to, because I got them used. If you would like to help support the cause. If not, that's fine. 94. Okay. Y'all live together, right? Okay, so I'm just going to give y'all one for now until I can get more. Okay, you don't? Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that your marriage fell apart. Okay. Okay. And I already gave Seth one. So, hang on. I may have... Now, here's what I would ask you. If you're going to read them when you get to your house, okay? If you're not going to read them when you get to your house, leave it in your pew. That's when you're not here. Or if you are here, you're not like, oh man, we left it at the house. I haven't seen it in 6 months. Okay, you'll know where it's at. Does that make sense? Okay, yes? No? Okay. Yeah. The numbers, are the paragraph numbers. Yeah, because that's for reference. Just like when the Bible, when you say turn there, I can say turn to paragraph 1777. Does that make sense? Makes it easy. All right. Which family would like an extra copy? You got one at home? Okay. All right. Would Seth and Lydia want an extra one? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. All right, we're not going to be able to get far, but we're going to go ahead and introduce it. All right, so I think that's a pretty good introduction of what we're doing, right? All right, so here we go. The introduction to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Oh boy, just sounds weird even saying that. All right, here we go. Introduction. Let's start with the word catechism. You don't even need the catechism right now, okay? Because we got to do all that. We got to do all the history before we can get to the actual catechism itself. All right, catechism. All right. We start with the word catechism. What is a catechism? Catechism, the word basically means to teach orally. Right? To teach orally. Right? Now, why do they say that? To catechize would be to teach someone orally would be like, okay, hey, Janice, Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. Right? And then I would say, now who is Jesus Christ? And she would say, the only begotten Son of God. All right. So it's an oral teaching. It's sometimes, in most cases, it's a question and answer form. Catholic Catechism, the catechism you have in front of you, is not in a question and answer form. And there's a reason why. You should know, but if you don't know, you will learn. All right. The Greek word katecheo is used in the Bible. All right. I have a number of places where I think it is used. I don't have my Greek New Testament with me. But go to Luke chapter 1, I believe. Luke chapter 1, verse 4. That thou mightest know the certainty of those things wherein thou hast been instructed, okay? Instructed, catechized, instructed, taught. You get the idea? To catechize, catechesis, to teach, to instruct. Everybody got that? Yes? All right. How about Acts chapter 21, I believe? Acts chapter 21, I believe it's verse 21. Yep. Acts chapter 21, verse 21. And they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after their custom. The idea is to teach us, to catecheo, to teach, to instruct. Get the idea? Right? I'm just trying to give you the basic understanding of the word, okay? All right, I think in Romans, I believe there's one in Romans. I believe it's chapter 2. Let me look really quick. Yeah, Romans chapter 2, I believe verse 18. Tell me amen when you get there. Romans 2:18, and knowest his will and approvest the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. All right? Now, I could go on and on and on, but teach, instruct, or where there's at least 2 more references in the New Testament. You get the idea, right? To instruct, to teach. I don't want to belabor the point. You get the idea, okay? So, in other words, catechize, it's nothing like when I first became a pastor here and I would mention a catechism, you almost, like, initially, the response was kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not us. We're Baptists. We don't believe in these catechisms. It just means to instruct, right? And catechisms have been a part of Christianity forever, right? So far, good? All right. So, basic idea, instruct, teach, inform. To instruct, to inform by word of mouth, to be orally informed. Now, why would there be such an emphasis on the oral part? Well, how was the instruction done pretty much in the early church? Oral instruction. Now, not everyone could open up a catechism. Not everyone definitely didn't own a Bible. Okay, didn't have a Bible. I mean, you don't even really have a closed canon to almost 400. So for 400 years, Christianity, there's no canon. Okay, now they make reference to the writings of the apostles, no question. They make reference to the Gospels, but no one could have looked at them. So you had to orally instruct people. That's why they use creeds. They use catechesis, right? So, you get the basic idea of the word catechism, right? Now, a catechism is a summary of exposition of doctrine and serves as a learning introduction to, now this would be a word that we could have, in church history we'd have a lot of discussion about, all right? So let's go through this again. So, what a catechism is, remember the Greek word is katecheo, used throughout church history. A catechism is a summary of, listen, exposition of doctrine. So it's a summary and an exposition of doctrine. Early church needed this kind of thing. They didn't have a lot of things that we would even consider. I mean, they could have never dreamed what we have. So they needed something to say, okay, let's summarize the doctrines that we hold to. It serves as a learning introduction, right? It serves as a learning introduction. I want you to understand that. The catechisms were a learning introduction. Okay? They were not even seen as the end, but as the beginning. Now, if you look at the size of a Catholic catechism, that's considered the introduction. Yeah, that's the introduction to learning. Right? That's how many pages? If we leave out, we're talking pretty close to 600, pretty close to 700. All right, that's a lot, is it not? Okay, that's a learning introduction, and it was a learning introduction to. Now we'll use this word, the sacraments. Remember, we would be. As Baptists, obviously, we reject that term. We'll have to break that term down. All right. Traditionally used to catechize. Okay. And when we say catechize or catechesis, and it was dealt with the teaching of children and adult converts. Children and adult converts. Now, what would be the difference? What they basically would do is they would have a catechism for the adults and a catechism for the children. Same truths would be outlined, but what would be the difference? The answers would be much simpler for a child. Who made you? God. Right? That's a famous catechism in churches. Who made you? God. Right? Who is God? Right? Simple questions like that, right? Okay. How many persons in the Godhead? 3, right? Like, who are they? Right. Simple things like that would be the basic idea. So basically a catechism is a summary of exposition of doctrine and serves as a learning introduction to the sacraments traditionally used in catechesis, right, or religious teaching of children and adult converts. Right? Everybody get that idea? All right. Now, we could study the history of catechisms. How much time do we have? We're done with this hour. We're getting close, right? All right. We could look at the history of catechisms throughout church history. Everyone should be able to name some famous ones. What are some famous catechisms in church history? Heidelberg, Puritan. Okay, what? Okay, Luther's large and small catechism. There's one, a big one you're missing. Starts with a W. Hey, there we go. Westminster Catechism. Very important one, okay? Right, in fact, that's the Westminster Catechism is at the end of our hymnal, right? With the Confession of Faith. All right? So there was lots of catechisms that were present throughout. Now, you can go further back and find catechisms that were known among some of the church fathers, or they used catechesis, the idea, even if it wasn't a published one. Remember, in the early church, they used catechesis, but it was orally done. They didn't have a written one. All right? And so what would have been one of the bases, what would have been the first thing probably used for catechesis? Well, the Didache served as a catechism, the Apostles' Creed. Right? That's easy to catechize orally with the Apostles' Creed. Easy to do so. Does that make sense? All right. But let's go through the history of the Catholic catechisms. All right? Let's go through the history of the Catholic catechisms because we got a number of them. All right? Here we go. The first one is known as the Roman Catechism. The Roman Catechism. All right. Do you know the other name that this one goes by? The Roman Catechism, probably as Protestants, we don't know it as the Roman Catechism, but we typically refer to it as the Catechism of the Council of Trent. All right. Now, why was one produced at this point for the Council of Trent? There we go. Remember, Trent is called the Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation. And what they begin to realize is the Reformers were producing catechisms. And they needed to counter that, right? They needed to so that this is where the Council of Trent produces one. Yeah, we're going to get to that here in a second, all right? Sometimes it's referred to the Catechism of Pius V. The Catechism of Pius V. Now, everybody who knows Pius V was a pope, obviously. Pope Pius V. All right. For his date, all right, for his life, Pope Pius lived from 17 January, I believe, 1504. I'm trying to read my own writing. 17 January 1504 to 1 May 1572. 17 January 1504 to 1 May 1572. He was Pope from 7 January 1566 to 1 May 1572 when he died. Okay. And does anybody, how long for Pope? For his life? Yeah, 1504. Yeah. Does anybody know what he died of? Church history trivia. So I'm going to help you win trivia questions. They think he died of cancer. They think. Can't be dogmatic about it. All right. Now, does anybody know the date of when this catechism was published? 1566. 1566. And I guess, obviously, we know it was published under the authority of the Council of Trent. Yeah. Yeah, or at least overseeing it, yeah. And everybody know why the Council of Trent met, correct? From your history? Yeah, it was to address the claims of the reformers because, schisms were breaking out. The Reformation starts with Luther, and then, of course, then did all the quote-unquote Protestants stay together? Oh, no. Then they started fighting, and they started fighting, and they started fighting, and everyone started disagreeing because, remember, once the Protestant Reformation happens, who becomes the authority? At the end of it, I know that that's not popular to say and not politically correct, but we just got to be honest with each other, all right? Because Luther's like, okay, I'm starting a Reformation. Zwingli comes along and is like, wait, I want to be a part of your Reformation. And Luther's like, well, wait, do you believe this? And then Zwingli's like, no. It's like, well, you can't be a part of my Reformation. And then Zwingli's like, okay, I'm going to do my thing. And then Calvin shows up and he's like, well, I want to be a part of the Reformation. And Zwingli's like, do you believe this? And he's like, can't be a part of my Reformation. And Luther's like, it's not his Reformation, it's my Reformation. And then it's like, well, then Calvin's like, well, I don't want to be a part of either of your Reformation. I'll start my own Reformation. And so you basically had Reformation after Reformation and Reformation with everyone doing their own thing. And I know that's unpopular to say, but if you're going to be a student of church history, you can't deny the fact. You can't rewrite the history to make us feel better. Right? They all broke up into different groups. And as it began, and remember, what was a major component of Catholicism, especially in the 1500s and going back? A merging of what two things? Church and state were merged together. Now, we don't like them. That's one of the things as Baptists we don't like. We shouldn't like. Many Baptists today want a merging of church and state. We never want the merging of church and state because what always happens when church and state merge? People die. And here's the reason why. Religious law becomes civil law. And one of the things religious law will condemn is heresy. Right. And so now so the civil authority comes and punishes people for heresy. That's why when you read church history, you're like, they're putting people to death. They're putting people to death. It's not necessarily the church putting people to death. The church and the state are merged. So the church is like, that's a law. That heresy is wrong, and the civil authorities were like, they broke the law, you have to be punished, and you die. That same thing happened in Geneva with Calvin, right? And you're like, that's horrible. Why did it happen? Because what did they merge? They wanted the civil law and the religious law to be unified. I know that there's a temptation for us to go, wouldn't it be great if we had Christian laws? Well, it would be great if your form of Christianity is in charge. The minute your form of Christianity is not in charge, you're now the heretic who's going to be punished by civil law. Okay, so the Baptists have a history, early Baptists, of saying, no, keep the two separate, man. Keep the two separate. We don't want that because if we get together, we're good if we're in charge. But the minute we're not in charge, heads start getting chopped off. Right? Bad things happen. We don't no. We don't want that. So guess what happens? The church and state is merged, and they're looking at their, quote unquote, the society, and it's falling apart because everyone's doing what? The war is happening, right? You got wars that literally break out after the Reformation. You got people who, after the Protestant Reformation, they were running into Catholic churches, breaking things and dragging priests out and beating them up. They're like, we're done with the Catholic Church. And then they're like, ooh, we got to get this under control. We got to get this under control. And so they're going to issue a catechism to say, hey, study this. Okay. Now, it's not going to matter because the Protestants are not going to study it because they're done, because they're doing their own thing. But that's what happens, right? So 1566, and this is the last thing we'll say because we're over time. The catechism, the Roman Catechism, or called the Catechism of Trent, was not intended for common use by the laity. Now, this is very important to understand, and I'll explain it in a minute. It was not intended for use by the laity. Now, why? Well, the Catholic Catechism of 94, the one that's authoritative for the Church, the Catholic Church today, this catechism you hold in your hands, this is not necessarily intended for the laity of the Catholic Church either. All right? Here's what happens. You publish the big book, all right, the source book, and then local catechisms can be made based off this. So what they produce, so for example, has everyone ever heard of the Baltimore Catechism? All right, the most famous Catholic catechism that many Catholics know. That there was a bigger catechism. The Baltimore Catechism then took the bigger catechism and broke it down into manageable, like a small, I mean, that's a gigantic book, right? So then they're like, okay, so I can't remember what year, I think probably 2000 something, they released a Catholic catechism for adults. I can't remember what it's called. And basically it's a summary of this, right? To make it easier to understand. The bigger catechisms were for whom? The priest, the people of the church, so that they could learn the teaching of the church, and then their job was to possibly then produce smaller catechisms with the approval of the church, obviously within the Catholic system. All right, does that make sense? The Protestants didn't necessarily do that same thing. What would be the best example of Protestants doing that? The best example I could say is this. All the catechisms produced by Protestants were pretty much for everyone. So the way you could see it is Protestants produced systematic theologies. From the systematic theologies come the catechisms. Does that make sense? Like if you want to know Lutheran theology, the catechism gives you a little bit, but you got to go to bigger things like the Augsburg Confessions. That's a big book, right? But if you're a Lutheran, you were Lutheran, I was Lutheran, we just get the little catechism, right? Because most of the people aren't going to go read the Augsburg Confessions. Now, you could argue from a Protestant perspective, well, considering, we would probably have to argue that we should probably be reading the big book if we're going to try to determine what truth is. I mean, we could get into a kind of an argument there. In the Catholic system, you don't have to necessarily do that because you've already alleviated your responsibility and you're relying on an outside authority. Protestants, we kind of claim that who's the authority. I know we try to claim it's the Bible, but it becomes who's the interpretation of the Bible. And if you disagree with the interpretation of the Bible of anybody else, then you go and either start your own church or you do what? Go find a church that agrees with your interpretation. So we have to just acknowledge that problem. All right. That gives us kind of we've got a long ways to, we got some more thing. We got to get to the Catechism of St. Pius. We got to get to the Baltimore Catechism, the Catechism of Christian Doctrine, the Dutch Catechism, and we got to do the catechism, and then we get to the actually it's 92. The one I said 94, so you were right, 92. Right. So we have to get to all of those, and we'll get to the history of those and things. But we'll stop right there. That gives us an introduction, and then we'll have a long ways to go. It's going to be 18 years study for this. It's going to be a long study. But whenever we get into church history, that's what we have to do. All right, let's stop, and then we'll get ready for this morning's worship. Lord God, we come before you this morning. Lord, as we study the history of Christianity, all the twists and turns and the journey that it has taken, I pray that we always approach it with humility, with a desire for truth, whether it offends or doesn't offend, but just understanding the history of the faith which we all profess. I pray that everyone here will, in this church, since the very beginning of this church, we've had a hunger for church history. I pray that never dies. And I pray that we always are willing to humbly look at what came before us. And we ask this in Jesus' name. And God's people said...